The very essence of what makes us human is our consciousness. With the ability to self reflect and observe ourselves, we have built incredible civilizations and achieved feats beyond our wildest imaginations. However, this amazing gift also has a darker side. It can lead to incredible destruction and suffering, both for ourselves and for those around us. But it's not all bad news. Within this battle lies the potential for growth and transformation. In this video, we'll uncover the root of our inner turmoil and provide you with tools and strategies to overcome it. All right, well, let's just begin then. This is one of those videos where I recommend that you don't take notes, at least for the first time watching it. I want you to just listen to this and get the understandings down. When you're taking notes, you can't do that as well. So this video will be here for you to come back to it in order to take notes if you want to. And in the description of this video is the process that I'm going to talk about. So you can just click that link, download that PDF, and you have it. So there's your notes. I think note taking can be really good, but in certain things, it's better to have the initial understanding first, and then come back over it with notes. I want you to think about something you want. Now, a lot of people will think about a problem they want to solve. So their mind goes to the problem, and that's a problem. It's good to know what a problem is. It's good to know that if there's a problem, you know what the problem is. That's not bad information. But if you're only focusing on the problem, then that's usually the first place that we're stuck. And oftentimes, when we think about what we want, we only do it in terms of what we don't want. And that again is a problem. We can't move forward if you're focused on what you're trying to avoid. And I've used this analogy many, many times. If you go to a store and the clerk walks up to you and says, "Can I help you with something?" and you say, "I don't want socks," you're no closer to getting what you want. And the clerk will probably say, "Okay, great. I won't show you any socks. What do you want?" And then you say, "Well, I don't want shirts." Then you're not making any progress here. You could stand there all day and say everything that you don't want. And maybe through the process of elimination, you end up, after saying all the things you don't want, you end up with one thing left. And there you go. That's what you want. But usually it doesn't work that way. We usually give up before that happens. So think about something you want, not something you don't want. And if you want to solve a problem, then think about what is it you want that solving that problem would get for you. And it's good to be specific in terms of something you can put in sensory based terms, meaning it's not just like, I want to be happy, I want peace, all those wonderful values, which are important. A lot of these videos, I've talked about values and their importance, but we also need to get rooted in sensory based information so that we can create a sensory based reality that gives us what we want. So it can be an achievement, it can be a goal, it can be an experience like, I want to travel the world. That's tangible. Somehow where you can know for sure if you've gotten what you want. You can check that box. You've crossed the finish line. It's in hand. I can see you having it or achieving it. Can a third party witness you actually having this thing or achieving it? That's how you know if it's sensory based. But if you just say, "Well, I'll be happier." Okay, I can look at you and you can have behavior that is usually associated with being happy, but I don't know that you're actually happy. I can't see that and I can't hear that. But if you said, "I want to buy a new house," and I see you walk into your new house, well, there you go. You've got it. So something tangible that you want, and then ask yourself what stops you from being, having, or doing it. If you want to be, I don't know, a professional athlete, what stops you? If you want to travel the world, or if you want to travel more, or if you know you haven't ever traveled and want to travel, what stops you? If you want $1 million, what stops you? Some of us will think about the external obstacles, and there usually are some. I was reading some of the comments on videos earlier today, and somebody said, well, what if what stops me is someone else regarding their values? And I was like, mm, that doesn't, nobody can stop us from fulfilling our values. Somebody might stop us or get in our way of achieving or accomplishing something that's tangible, like I was just talking about. So there might be some real obstacles there. It's good to know what those are. But we also want to know, is there anything stopping you from within that would prevent you from even approaching those obstacles? And that often is the case. One obstacle might be it's too much work or it's too difficult. Well, where is that obstacle really? It appears to be outside of us, but it's really inside of us. Oftentimes, when we encounter external obstacles that actually get in our way, meaning we're not actively working through them. Actively working through an external obstacle can take time. But if you're not even doing that because it's perceived as an external obstacle that you can't get beyond, that obstacle is more inside of you. Now, I've done an entire video on what resistance is, and that's basically what we're talking about here. More specifically, we're talking about resisting resistance in this video. That's what it means to fight yourself. If you simply just have resistance to doing something, you could say you're on you're in the what's the word I'm looking for? You're in the talk phase of starting a fight with yourself. The resisting of your resistance is when we start is the when the fight starts. And unfortunately, so much of what you will find in personal development encourages this fight, glorifies it. You know, you got to fight yourself. You got to fight the resistance. You got to beat it down. You got to bulldoze over it. If you can't, you must. Right? Never worked for me in the sense that it gave me what I wanted in terms of the totality of it and fulfillment. Have I fought myself to the point of achieving the goal that I was out to achieve? Yes. And it was a very unfulfilling experience, very empty experience. I even to the point of asking myself, why did I do this? And how do I make sure I don't do this again? So if you're in a fight with yourself and you win, you've really lost because that implies that you had to beat part of yourself into submission. That doesn't feel very good. That's not fun. That's not enjoyable. That's not peace. That's not happiness. When I started doing yoga years ago, I started to feel like I was in a fight with my own body, which is very strange because yoga is supposed to make us feel more peaceful, right? And I ended up injuring myself because I was actually fighting my physicality. I was working against myself, and my teacher knew it and would tell me to cool it. That's an example of like you can do things that most people think are good, healthy practices, and still be fighting with yourself and it not being good for you. So you think about what it is you want and you ask yourself what stops you from having it, from doing it, from being it. What comes up? You might get something like fear of failure, fear of disappointment. Don't tell me you're afraid of success. We've already been over that. There's no such thing. And if an external obstacle comes up, then ask yourself, what's stopping me from overcoming that obstacle? So find out what is coming up, what is holding you in place here. What have you been fighting in yourself? Because what you've been fighting is really what the key is here. And it's time to stop fighting. It's not helping you. There's nothing noble about it. There's nothing glorious about it. And if you beat yourself into submission, who cares? I see reels and TikToks and stories and things like that, Instagram and Facebook, and of people glorifying this. And I was just like watching this thinking, I mean, I'll find out someday. When you have beat yourself into submission so many times over, I don't know, 2 decades or so, you find yourself in midlife going, what has this ever gotten me? Except a lot of emptiness and a lot of fighting and with myself that does nothing. It does no good. It does not help anyone. It's not helping you. And you can say, well, it makes me tougher. Well, let those external obstacles toughen you up. Don't become a masochist and think that there's such glory in toughening yourself up that you hurt yourself and in the process. It's not necessary. Life will throw plenty of curveballs at you and you will make plenty of mistakes. Know that that will be there. You don't have to do it to yourself. There'll be plenty of external resistance and external fights you'll have to have when you're going after what it is that you want. And I think that there are people who do this to themselves specifically because they want to sort of control the obstacle, control the fight, so to speak. They don't want to put themselves out there and have to confront the external obstacles because there's too many unknowns. It's too scary. So they would rather fight themselves and then say, "See, I'm working on this." Try to prove it to themselves and prove it to other people that they are in fact working on this. Save those fights for what happens outside of you. Your who you are is the only true home you will ever know. So in your true home, do you want fighting? Do you want it to be filled with tension because of resisting resistance? I don't want that in my home. So take it out of your home. And how we do that is not by trying to remove parts of yourself. It's the opposite, accepting these parts of yourself. A lot of resistance, what it really is just outdated software, outdated programming, internal software. So if you were, all of you are safe to say you're on a computer right now if you're watching this, and even if that computer is the computer in your phone. Imagine if you were running your computer off of Windows 95. You wouldn't even be watching this right now. Windows 95 couldn't handle YouTube or Facebook or wherever you're watching this because it wasn't equipped for that. It didn't exist at that time. And if you were trying to access this video right now through a computer that was working or running off of Windows 95 and it couldn't handle it, it couldn't come on, would you then say your computer is trying to sabotage you? That'd be pretty silly. No, it's the software is outdated. You need new software. You need to update the software. And well, in the case of Windows 95, you need to throw it out completely. But in general, it's not a good idea to try to throw out programming because programming in you is there for a reason. And if you completely throw it out, which unfortunately sometimes they teach that in either personal development courses, I've even seen it in NLP courses, you throw everything out of whack and it's very destabilizing. So we're not looking to just throw software out. We want to upgrade it. We want to update it. Now, in a traditional NLP process, it's called what they call conflict integration. Usually they call it the visual squash because the idea here is to take what you want, and that's like one part of you. It's usually the very conscious part of you, and assign it to a hand. And so you'll maybe say, okay, what I consciously want, I'll put that me who wants that in my right hand. And then whatever the resistance is, that part of me, which is usually the unconscious part, but we're in the process of making it conscious. And you put that in the other hand. And then you hold these two yous out in front of you in your hands, and you do a values elicitation on each. I like this part so far. So I want to know what are my deeper values here. And first of all, with the resistant part, I need to find out what is its positive intention. We always assume positive intention, even of the parts that you think are trying to stop you. There is a positive intention there. This is the outdated software. So we find that positive intention, and most of the time when we ask for it and we try to make friends with this part, it will get stated in the negative, as in, I don't want. I don't want you to fail. I don't want you to be disappointed. I'm afraid, or something like that. I'm scared. So these things will normally come out stated in the negative, and what you want to do is get it reversed and stated in the positive. So if you don't want to fail, what do you want instead? Listen, let the part tell you what it wants. I'm not kidding. It'll come to you. And when it comes to you, trust it. What do you want instead of failure? Most of the time, when I ask myself that question, it says, I want you to succeed. Oh, wow. This part of me that was resistant, that's so resistant, actually wants me to succeed. Wait a minute. That doesn't fit with all of the other stuff that I've learned that I've got to like beat this thing into submission. This part of me that I wanted to destroy actually wants me to succeed. Interesting. Okay. These two have something in common. This wants me to succeed as well. I wonder what other great values this part of me is seeking out. And you do a full values elicitation here. You have the full values elicitation here. And then the next step of this is you bring your hands together. I can't really do it too well with my microphone. And you basically are slamming these parts together after you've gained some greater awareness that they're kind of both after the same thing. And you hope that all works out. And sometimes it does. I would say maybe 50% of the time it does. And maybe if you have a really good NLP coach, maybe it's even more than that. Maybe they're really thorough about it, or maybe you're very thorough about it. Maybe you've had some NLP training and you're pretty good with this. Now, if you want to know the most elegant conflict integration you will ever see, it's Steve Andreas created it, which is basically when we transform an ambiguous quality. Some of my students might be here, and they might not have thought about transforming an ambiguous quality as a conflict integration, but in a sense, it is. At the very least, it's a parts integration, maybe not a conflict. But when there's any ambiguity, it's unstable. So when you're fighting yourself, or you're in a resistant part, a place where one part of you is resisting the other, that's very unstable. We call that an ambiguity. And you want to resolve that. It's an incredible opportunity to grow and transform. We don't need to be afraid of this. In fact, count yourself lucky when you're able to uncover this. I don't want to say lucky. Not big into luck. Count yourself fortunate. And it's not that we always want to be looking for these conflicts, but what we want to do is we want to know, okay, what is it that I want and what's holding me back? That's what we need to know because you want to move forward. You want to get what you want, and you will once you understand what's holding you back so that you can integrate it. Now, I found the visual squash, especially after learning Steve's transforming an ambiguous quality. I found the visual squash to be crude, not as helpful and useful as I once thought, especially after being able to transform an ambiguous quality. I also found it not very efficient when I'm coaching people. Now, transforming an ambiguous quality, that's the full that's the full integration. Like there's no it's so precise. It's you're not slamming two things together and just hoping they work out. When you transform an ambiguous quality, there's eh, if it doesn't work, then you just keep working at it until you get enough of the pieces together, and you will. I mean, it's like one of those things of you will complete that. You will complete that integration. There's no doubt about it. If all you have to do is just make sure everything's in place. Very, very predictable, very precise, very smooth, very clean. So I wanted to have a way to work with people's resistance as I was coaching them in a more fast and dirty kind of way, but not take as long as the visual squash. The visual squash, I thought if I'm going to work fast and dirty with helping people move past their resistance, I want something shorter than the visual squash. It takes too long. And in the process of trying to find something more efficient, I also found a way to make it not as full on and predictable and comprehensive as transforming an ambiguous quality, because that takes some time too, but something that was pretty smooth that works better, I find, than the visual squash. And that's the process that's in the description that I mentioned. So I still want you to just listen to me. You can get access to that process, so don't worry about it. And basically, what I do is I'm working with someone in a coaching session and we're working toward what it is that they want. And then I check congruence. It's always what you want to check, which is basically saying, does any part of you object to making this change? And sometimes there are. In fact, a lot of the times there are. This is essential to what's holding you back. And then the part will say, yeah, I'm objecting to this. So I'm helping a person transform a quality that they value. Let's say they want to be more successful. And we're working on transforming that ambiguous quality into a quality. And when we're about to go, right before that, I say, is there any part of you that objects to being a successful person in a certain and solid way? And you'd be amazed how many people go, oh, yeah, there's a part of me that it's afraid. Okay, let's talk to that part. Welcome it, thank it for calling this to your attention. It's trying to do something positive for you. And then they'll do that and I'll say, ask it, what is its positive intention for you? And it'll usually say, I don't want you to fail because, I don't want you to fail because you feel pretty down about yourself already as it is. And if you fail another time, it's going to get worse. That's a valid complaint, right? So this part's trying to protect you. Most of these resistant parts are. That's all they're trying to do is protect you, which is why we don't want to repress them anymore, is why we don't want to shun them or push them away. They have good information. And say, okay, well, if you don't want me to fail, what do you want instead? Or I will tell the client, if you don't want, ask this part, if it doesn't want you to fail, what does it want instead? I want you to succeed. Great. And I go a little bit deeper. What's important to you about succeeding? Makes me happy. Great. Now we really got this locked in with a very high level value. And then we check in with the other part, the part that wants to transform into being a successful person. Of course, it's not going to have any problems with succeeding. But often what this part is offering is something different that the main part, the conscious part, hasn't thought of yet. This part has something to say, something to add to this that's very important, that's very useful. When I was doing this with myself, when I had some money issues and I needed to overcome some of my limitations around money, there was a part of me that feared that I would become greedy if I became financially successful. So, wow, that's interesting. Okay. Being greedy was in conflict with my sense of overall success because success I don't define as just how much money I make. Success to me is how fulfilled am I? How happy am I? Am I doing the things? Am I spending the majority of my waking hours doing things that I really want to be doing? That's has a lot to do with success for me. And if money hijacked my mentality and I became very greedy, this would get in the way of my overall success. I needed to understand this. I needed to understand this before I started making money. And it was like a part of me wouldn't allow me to make that money until I had that understanding. So once I started integrating these parts, realizing this part wanted me to be successful as well, it just needed to be added to the conversation here. It needed to be added to part of this. So once you know what that is, and then you realize, hey, we're on the same team here. We're not we don't need to fight each other. In fact, we're better off working together. And not only that, we will feel more whole. Our resources are connecting, so we're not divided. Imagine instead of being divided and fighting yourself to achieve something, you're in complete congruence and you're working with yourself in flow. That's what flow is when you're united in whatever it is that you're going after. Imagine that. How much faster are you going to get what you want if you do that rather than fight yourself every step of the way and glorify it on by putting up TikToks about it? Maybe if your goal is to become a viral TikToker, maybe that's what will do it. But it's so much easier, so much more enjoying and fulfilling when all parts of you are on board and all unified toward a common goal. It works. You will achieve it much faster. You will be much more motivated. You will enjoy it so much more. And that's why I always say if you're not enjoying the process to achieving what it is that you want, something's not right. Because do not think that if you're not enjoying and you're not fulfilled by any part of the process, that suddenly when you achieve it, that suddenly the fulfillment is just going to rain down on you. It does not work that way. If you're not enjoying it every step of the way, when you finally achieve it, you might feel relieved that it's over. You might experience some momentary joy and satisfaction and some, you can celebrate, but it's going to evaporate very quickly and it's going to feel very empty. So every time you bump into resistance, welcome it and bring it in. And so with my situation, I just said to that part, okay, do you understand that we're trying to succeed overall? And it's like, yes, I get that now. And the part that really brings it home is when you invite the other part to be a part of this process of success and you ask it if it will take on a role for you. Ask it if it will be willing to take on a job. And that job for this particular case was as I become more successful financially, will you be there? This is your job. Would you take on this role of making sure that I don't become greedy, I'm a generous person with the money that I'm making? Would you take on that role? And I have never once in my own history of integrating my own resistance or working with a client has that part ever said no. That's all this part wants. The part wants to be reunited with the whole, and it wants to be useful, and it wants to fulfill its intention. That's all it wants. There's a saying about Every drop of water wants to return to the mother ocean, something like that. Every part of you wants to be reconnected and unified with the whole. And when you do that, you will feel it. And so that's where we want to get to. I was doing a group teaching one time on a Zoom call, and a woman was having a lot of resistance as we were working toward transforming a quality. And so I brought her on because it's just much easier to do that. And so she turned on her microphone and we started doing this process. And then I got to that point where I said, "Now ask the part if it'd be willing to take on this role." And I gave it the description of the role, and she just broke down crying. And so I said, "Okay, hey, are you okay?" And she goes, "No, that's all this part ever wanted. It just wanted to be reconnected with the rest of me." And as soon as it hit, it she broke into tears, and it was good tears. It wasn't painful. It was kind of like that's finally coming home. It's all I ever wanted, and just that reunification with herself. And it had lasted so long that she didn't even know that that was missing until it reconnected. And then you always want to check, did that do it? Are we free to go? Is it okay now to move forward with whatever, it was resisting? Are we good to go? Is there any more objections? Sometimes there is. Sometimes you have to satisfy some other objection that it might have. And sometimes um, there's other objections. There's other parts that are objecting. So don't think that it didn't work. You just might have to do more negotiating with this part. What's amazing about this process is how fast it is, especially when you get good at it. When you understand what's going on with yourself, or if you're a coach working with someone else. It's not as foolproof as transforming an ambiguous quality, because there you're working with specific examples, but it works really, really fast and efficiently and gets people to the other side. Now, if you have NLP training and you've ever wondered why something doesn't work, or that it worked at first, like an NLP intervention or a process that works, but then the next day it seems to go away. Like, let's take the swish pattern, which I've already taught in this live series. Some people will come back and say, well, the swish didn't work. So we go about troubleshooting. A lot of times the reason why it didn't work is because they impose content. The ideal image of themselves is them doing some particular behavior or in some particular location, or both. So I'm like, hey, you didn't really listen. That's something you got to leave out. But sometimes there's an objection there. There's a part that's resistant, even to the swish pattern. And so you have to figure out, okay, well, what does that part want from me? And then go through this whole process. Have a conversation with yourself. I've always been really surprised by the answers I get when I do that. And if you can't be honest with yourself, who can you be honest with? Now, I don't talk out loud. That would be probably very strange, even if my wife were around listening to me. Even that would be strange. So I just talk to myself in my head and ask myself questions like that. Well, what's stopping me? I want this thing. What's stopping me? And then I go from there. And I would absolutely recommend that you apply this with any conflict or any resistance that arises. Remember, the full method of all of this, I'm kind of jumping around, I know. I Full method of all of this is in the description of this video. So get your PDF and come back and watch this video, and understanding the exact steps. And if you want to take notes, by all means do so. But the steps are there. I just really wanted to impart the understanding of this to you. So in conclusion, one way to approach life is to look at all conflict as inner conflict. When you start with yourself and find peace from within through integrating conflicting parts, you can bring that peace and integration into your environment and your relationships. Doesn't just stop with you. All conflict is an opportunity to find a higher level of consciousness in order to integrate lower levels of consciousness. I'll say that again. Very important. All conflict is an opportunity to find a higher level of consciousness in order to integrate lower levels of consciousness. Don't be afraid of it. There's always an opportunity here. So make this a practice, and I assure you, it's so simple and it will change your life. I do this with myself all the time, and a lot of my students do it as well. And sometimes it's easy to overlook because it is so simple and it works so fast and so well. People are just kind of like, oh, and don't even think about it. They just move on. So, what is your big takeaway from what you got from this live today? Write it down and please share here in the comments. It's always nice to read them. And what also happens too is somebody, they're kind of focused on their big takeaway and then they see someone else's and they go, oh, yeah, there was that too. I didn't even think to remember that. Or, so sometimes people point out things here that other people missed or forgot. See, when I imagine having self-discipline, I get this pain and tension in my chest and throat. Yeah. I don't, like I said, well, I've done a live on this, on discipline and willpower. It's not the answer. It is not the answer. If you can't, you must. Straight up, Tony Robbins there. Yes, it is. And I'm not dissing everything that Tony does, but that's one I don't agree with. I have disagreements with him. I'm not dissing him. See, Marie Louise Taylor says, amazing, and I'm in tears. Thanks, Damon Louise from Bucharest, of course. Hey, how are you, Marie? J. Foch. All right. It says, I disagree. It's okay to reject and release all forms of weakness within. Okay, you can do what you want, but I can tell you what rejecting any part of you, even if it's a weak part of you, is not the answer. Release all forms of weakness from it. I don't know what you mean by release, but rejecting any part of you, I mean, you can maybe argue whether or not that's good for you, but it's impossible. How do you reject a part of you? I mean, it's still there. You can't, it doesn't get rid of it. You're just rejecting a part of yourself, which is dividing yourself, which is will keep you from being fulfilled. So if you identify what you call a weakness, you can choose to try to strengthen it or just accept it as it is. And sometimes I do that with certain things. I accept that I will never be as organized of a person as my wife is. And that's one of the reasons why I keep her around. She does the organizing for me. It's kind of that's mainly a joke, but there are some things that I'm weak at. And sometimes I go, I would rather spend more time focusing on strengthening a strength than strengthening a weakness. And then sometimes I go, okay, well, I'll try strengthening this weakness. I'll see where I get with it. And sometimes it works. It's like, okay, that's good too. You make your choices, but rejecting over accepting, it's not going to work out well for you. I can assure you. But if you don't want to take my word for it, then it's your life. I'm not going to argue with you. All right, somebody lost my audio, but other people said that they could hear me. Okay, good. See, I think it sounds like one of the laws of the universe, the law of divine oneness. Just by the name of the law, I can kind of understand what it means, but I can't say that I'm fully familiar with that, the full meaning or details of what that is. To work with resistance, for example, fear of failure using the self-concept model, would you work on the failure or quality or the courage quality, or maybe both? Well, when we transform a quality, so let's imagine that the person comes to me and says, I'm a failure. So they identify failure as a quality of who they are. Then I would say, "Well, what would you rather be instead?" And maybe they'll say, "Well, I wanna be, a success." So we wanna transform failure to success, if that's what the person wants, and it's really important to use their words. So, now, maybe as a resource or as an additional quality, maybe they need courage, and we'll work on that as well then. And for it depends on the person. Sometimes people can go with larger chunk qualities, and some people need to chunk it down. So, for example, if a person says, "I'm a failure," and that they have multiple qualities that sort of hold that generalization in place, or say multiple beliefs that hold that belief in place, we might need to chunk it down to smaller beliefs. That happens sometimes. And one of those beliefs might be I'm a coward or something like that, in which case then you could use courage and to transform that identification as a coward into being courageous. So you kind of have to just sort out what the person needs and really elicit it from them and make sure you use their words. Or if you're working on yourself, make sure you're using your words. So if in your mind being a failure, what you want instead is being courageous, then go with that. It doesn't have to be successful. So use the words that come up for you. See, takeaway: all conflict is an opportunity to find a higher level of consciousness, to integrate a lower level of consciousness, to resolve a conflict at a lower level of consciousness. Good. My takeaway: my worst enemy is my best friend. Yeah, I guess you could say that. Yeah. Is internal, make friends with both. Okay. If you exclude something, reject, or push away, you are also excluding, rejected, and pushed away. Yes, it has both sides, or rather, it both are within. Yes, you can't. I mean, if you're going to go with this idea of rejecting a part of yourself, you're really rejecting yourself. So, it doesn't really make sense to do that. And even if it's a weakness that you want to strengthen, you first have to accept it as part of you. All right. Once again, really appreciate all of you showing up. Make sure you get that PDF so you have the steps and work through those steps. And I'd love for people to start using this now, like today or like right after this video, and think about those things that you want and what's holding you back from getting it. And when you use this process to move forward, drop me a comment. I love hearing about this stuff. I mean, it really, I love sharing this. And one of the things that really motivates me to share is results. So when you're coming back and telling me, yeah, hey, I use that process and man, I would have never done whatever, whatever actions you're taking. So Erasmus says, takeaway, I'm just learning a lot here, especially talking about the ambiguous quality in relation to conflict. Just lovely. I love that there is always new perspectives in every video you make. Oh, appreciate that, Rasmus. Thanks. All right. Well, thank you for showing up. I will be doing this tomorrow. So I'll see you tomorrow as well. Take care, everybody. Oh, you're welcome, Marie.